Auschwitz was the biggest concentration camp run by Nazi Germany during the Third Reich. At least 1.1 million individuals perished inside the barbed wire walls as a result of the guards' brutality against the inmates and the gas chambers. Rudolf Hoess, the commander, was later put to death within the camp at Auschwitz on a specially constructed gallows for the agony and terror he imposed on the vast complex. Inmates were often killed by notorious staff members like Josef Kramer and Irma Grese, and guards were trained in the skill of instilling dread in their hearts. In addition to mass murder, it was also a site of torture. In particular, there was one block that became extremely feared. Block 11, a brick structure located inside Auschwitz I, was the site of horrifying punishment. What's the story behind this, though? Come examine the horrifying torture that took place in Block 11 at Auschwitz today. Please remember to subscribe in order to support our station. Originally used as an army barracks, Auschwitz evolved into the biggest and deadliest concentration camp in the Third Reich during World War II. There were almost 1.3 million inmates kept there, and a significant number of inmates were executed every day in the gas chambers. There was agony, famine, and death everywhere in the camp. In order to carry out their daily tasks, prisoners were had to labor very hard and receive very little food, which resulted in widespread malnutrition. Although many guards wanted inmates to work until they just passed out, many more inmates never even entered the camp. People had to go through selection when they were brought to Auschwitz, where medical professionals and guards would decide which inmates could labor there. Those who were judged unfit or too young or old to work effectively were sent straight to the gas chambers to perish. Guards were instructed to be brutal in order to keep the camp law and order, and many of them went so far as to commit murder. Others would routinely beat and whip inmates to death in front of other people. Women like Johanna Bormann and Irma Grese were known to kill and maim captives with their dogs in addition to using them to terrorize them. Additionally, guards frequently shot prisoners who weren't doing their jobs well or producing as much as they could. Small violations of the camp's regulations may easily result in prisoners being beaten, and many were even killed for them. There were sizable gallows inside roll call yards where executions appeared to occur virtually every day. In order to teach other inmates to follow the rules, anyone who disobeyed or attempted to flee during roll call would be brought out in front of thousands of other inmates before being put to death. Some guards even earned nicknames such as the woman with the dogs or the hyena of Auschwitz for their sadistic tendencies. The inmate population was extremely afraid as a result, and one block in particular gained notoriety for its harsh disciplinary methods. Prisoners who broke the rules, such as returning for second helpings of food during mealtimes, bartering their own gold teeth to buy breaks, stealing food from kitchens, putting their hands in their pockets, and some being so desperate that they stole food from the pigsty were frequently punished. Large whipping spectacles were used to intimidate inmates, and floggings were performed in public at roll call. Inmates were pushed into a locked position while stretched across a table with their feet in a box using a flogging table called the goat. The guards then whipped the prisoners and made them wear lashes. Fun fuendes wanzig bessen dank have halten, which translates to 25 received with many thanks, was what they had to yell. The flogging started over at number 1 if they miscalculated the number. Inmates were also punished by being worn to posts while being attacked by hooks and having their hands chained behind their backs. Although they were then left hanging by their wrists in manacles reminiscent of the medieval era, Block 11 was notorious for being the cruel punishment block where torture was used. A brick structure inside Auschwitz I, the complex's main camp, was known as Block 11. Given that the Auschwitz death wall, where many captives faced the firing squad, was located between blocks 10 and 11, it was a location where executions and tortures occurred. There were several torture chambers and punishment blocks inside Block 11 that were used to get information from the inmates and cause them agony and suffering. Inside Block 11, inmates were subjected to severe torture during interrogations, and a variety of tools and techniques were employed to elicit information from them. Among these was the Boger swing, which was utilized within the block. Guard Wilhelm Boger created this apparatus, which was described as a meter-long iron bar suspended by chains strung from the ceiling. When a prisoner is brought in for questioning, they are stripped naked, hunched over the bar, and have their wrists manacled to their ankles. Boger would pose questions, first quietly, then barking them out, and last bellowing, as a guard at one side would push him or her off across the chamber in a long, slow arc. Every time the victim returned, a second guard brandishing a crowbar would slam them across the buttocks. The strikes continued until only a pile of gushing pulp hung before their eyes while the swinging continued and the crying victim fainted, was recovered, and then fainted again, howling. The majority died as a result of the experience, some sooner than others. Ultimately, a bag of bones, shredded flesh, and fat was hauled away from the wreckage of that concrete floor. Despite his reputation for supervising heinous crimes within the block, Boger was never put to death for his part in the camp's punishment. In September 1941, the first attempts and tests to use Zyklon B to kill and exterminate people and captives took place inside Block 11. The guards experimented with various methods of execution as the final solution intensified, and Zyklon B was eventually employed inside the gas chambers to murder hundreds of thousands of inmates. Commandant Rudolf Hoess personally observed the proceedings, which took place inside the block, and his guards presided over the first murder of Russian POWs in Block 11's basement. They kept using Block 11 to repeat the experiment on more Russian prisoners of war, and Hoess would observe the executions. However, Block 11 was no longer suitable because the basement was hard to ventilate after the killings due to inadequate ventilation, and the crematorium for disposing of the bodies was quite far away. As a result, gas chambers were constructed with crematoria adjacent to them. Thus, the prototype gas chamber was Block 11. Many of the inmates at Block 11 were thought to have participated in resistance or acts of rebellion within the camp. As a result, they were subjected to various forms of torture and interrogation, including being thrown into Block 11's specialized torture chambers and being beaten and disfigured. Block 11's Staybunker, also known as the standing cells, was an oubliette-style prison or cell used for punishment inside Auschwitz. 4 prisoners were squeezed into 4 standing cells that were only able to stand in the basement of Block 11 at Auschwitz. These cells were about 1 square yard in size. The inmates were locked in a single, claustrophobic standing position for up to 10 days, which was appalling and resembled an oubliette-style dungeon found in a fortress. While some inmates were permitted to leave for work before being placed back in the standing cells, there was very little airflow and only a 2-inch aperture for air to enter, preventing the inmates from suffocating but also limiting the amount of air available. During the Auschwitz trials, one cell survivor described how he was confined to the standing cells of Block 11 for 6 weeks while receiving just 3 meager meals. He also mentioned that one prisoner was so starving inside the walls that he even ate his own shows. The standing cells of Block 11 were taken down in 1943 by his successor, Arthur Liebehenschel, notwithstanding Rudolf Hoess's claim that they were only used for 3-night punishment. After being questioned, the inmates in Block 11 were typically given death sentences that included hanging or shooting. Many Polish priests were also kept inside the block during the camp's early years, along with numerous convicts condemned to the most grueling labor. First, groups of inmates who were compelled to burn bodies were placed in the Sonderkommando. Later, police prisoners who were thought to be involved in resistance activities were detained. Numerous inmates in Block 11 perished from famine, including those who had been given death sentences by starvation, that is, being put in a cell to simply starve. However, what was discovered outside in a courtyard between Block 11 and Block 10 was among the most heinous aspects of the neighborhood. The death wall was a concrete reinforced wall that was located just off to the side of the yard and served as the site of numerous executions by fire squads. The condemned were removed from their Block 11 cells and brought to the death wall, where they were shot by an SS fire squad after standing against the wall. The SS forces killed numerous Polish inmates and others thought to be involved in resistance activities, and thousands of prisoners were shot against the wall. Additionally, those who were brought into the camp to be slain had their death sentences executed on the killing wall. Numerous captives who had been taken as retaliation for Polish resistance actions in neighboring towns and cities were taken to Auschwitz, where they were murdered next to Block 11. Although the death wall was taken down in 1944, a recreation is still in place today. In this yard next to Block 11, inmates were also tied to the post and flogged. Thus, Block 11 was the most dreaded block of the deadliest concentration camp during World War II for torture and punishment. It was well feared and served as the Gestapo headquarters, where the detainees were subjected to harsh interrogation and treatment. It was known as the Death Block of Auschwitz because it was made into a place that no one wanted to remain by using tools like the Boger swing and the standing cells. It was only one aspect of the horrifying system of concentration camps, and it was only a tiny portion of the everyday agony and fear that captives endured at Auschwitz. Thank you for viewing. Please make sure to subscribe in order to help our channel. Thank you for viewing.